Hi everyone, my name's Kharel, and today we're going to be taking a look at how you build a good, fun maze in Meet Your Maker. Now, anyone who's spent any amount of time in Meet Your Maker has run across a bad maze as a raider, right? They're low-effort warrens of unpainted concrete, basically no traps anywhere, there's dead ends everywhere you look, there's a way to kill Harvey at the front that's difficult or impossible to avoid. We've all seen these, what I'm going to call traditional mazes. That is, they're maps designed similarly to a 3D version of a 2D pen and paper maze puzzle. And most of us absolutely hate encountering these as raiders, which is why today I'm going to try and show you exactly why we hate them and how to make a maze that's actually fun to play. By the way, the raid you're going to be seeing in the background here is by Karsticles from the community Discord, who kindly agreed to let me show off his replay as he attempts to perfect a good path through a maze. The map here is Butte Falls, a map I built specifically to try and test and prove some of the concepts I'm going to share with you today. I've got a few of these maps on social. I'm going to stick the names of them down in the video description if you want to give these a playthrough. Anyway, on with the discussion. What exactly does make a good maze? Now, there's a bit of a philosophical argument here that I need to acknowledge up front. Personally, I am of the opinion that the goal of building maps in Meet Your Maker isn't to prevent raiders from reaching the gen mat and escaping. Rather, it's to harvest kills while the raider is getting the gen mat, and hopefully entertain them enough that they'll give you accolades at the end of the map whether they succeed or fail in their objective. Now, Meet Your Maker's incentive structure is designed to not penalize builders when raiders succeed. The only exception to that is the overdrive mode, which generally you should never be using anyway, so the builder really loses basically nothing when a raider succeeds. Traditional mazes often cause a raider to rage quit without succeeding, and often they're so frustrated at that point that they will leave you no accolades, and they'll generally contribute very few kills, since they'll often leave after 1 to 2 deaths. Once they consider the map frustrating, you've pretty much lost them at that point. Therefore, if we want to build a successful maze where raiders enjoy your map and leave accolades when they're done, and are willing to keep playing despite their deaths, we need to address the problems with the traditional maze. So, in my opinion, most raiders hate traditional mazes for one main reason. They're literally designed to waste your time. Now, most people only have so much time to play the game, and they're going to want to have fun and feel rewarded for playing. So artificially extending the length of time that the raider spends in the map by any means makes the raider feel less rewarded per time that they spend. Additionally, traditional maze designs are often more frustrating than fun, and that's really all there is to it, at least in my opinion. The time-wasting aspect is really baked into how traditional mazes are designed. Though if you go back to those 2D pen and paper mazes, they are designed to make you spend time on them. And it's even worse in Meet Your Maker because you can only see a small part of the maze at any given time. You can't get that overview of the whole maze like you can with a 2D pen and paper maze. So let's go through each of these 4 time wasters one by one, along with my proposed solution for each. Alright, time waster number 1 is dead ends. There is literally nothing more frustrating to a raider than traversing down a hallway of any significant length, and then realizing there's absolutely nothing there. There's no tomb, there's no gen mat, there's nothing, often not even a good trap sequence. Then you have to backtrack, wasting yet more time until you're back at the original fork that led you down to the dead end. And hopefully you remember which direction you came from at that fork, because if you don't, you've got a 50-50 shot of wasting even more time by accidentally going backwards even further, especially if there aren't any landmarks to help you out. So if there's nothing else going on to distract you, as is often the case with these traditional mazes, it's incredibly frustrating and feels like a giant middle finger from the builder every single time it happens. The solution to this is to simply never make dead ends. A 2D maze in this style is typically called a braid or a braided maze, and while a good maze in Meet Your Maker doesn't have to be a perfect braid maze, it should at least avoid dead ends that the raider can't immediately visually identify. So if you do have dead ends, keep them short and make them like 1 to 2 blocks long. Make sure you're not using too many of them as well. Plus you can have your pathways end in a drop or geometry that Harvey can't traverse, which can lead to some interesting trapping opportunities. It doesn't matter if Harvey can traverse it as long as the raider can. Ending at the gen mat or a tomb is also generally fine if there's a dead end that is at a tomb location. The raider is going to come away from that dead end feeling rewarded and happy that they went that direction, right? It's not frustrating to encounter a dead end if there is something worth your time there. However, generally speaking, a pathway should never end in a straight dead end that forces the raider to turn around with nothing to show for it. Now, of particular interest here is that when you provide the raider a route forward, regardless of whether Harvey is on that pathway or not, it lets you do all kinds of beautifully fiendish things. You can stick hollow cubes in the floor amidst otherwise solid bedrock. You can have a cheeky corrosive cube in the floor after an upwards ramp. You can have the raider drop down a passageway into a hall full of traps and guards in every direction. There's opportunities everywhere, if you can find a way to make use of them. Now additionally, this lets you compact the maze significantly, since raiders are very likely to encounter most, if not all, of the areas in your map. And this leads me directly into time waster number 2, which is low trap density. A lot of traditional mazes fall prey to this because they spend a lot of capacity on structure. Low trap density means that the raider has a lot of downtime, and downtime generally isn't fun. In fact, it feels a lot like the map is wasting your time. No one, either the builder or the raider, gains anything from the raider walking down a long, empty hallway with nothing to do. Now, there's a couple solutions for this particular problem. The first goes all the way back to map selection. You want to look for maps with really gnarly, twisty, perforated bedrock. And most builders actually hate these maps, but with a good maze builder's mindset, that bedrock looks like free capacity for extra traps and creative inspiration for really twisty, convoluted pathways. The second solution here is to compact your maze. You may want to make it smaller. You want to rely on the interconnectivity of the pathways going back and forth and crossing each other to confuse the raider and redirect them back and forth through the pathways rather than just heading straight to the gen mat. This accomplishes several things. It lets you trap the primary hallways far more heavily, and it makes the raider more likely to become disoriented while they're dealing with those traps and guards, and that makes them more likely to fall behind and lose track of Harvey, and it provides some opportunities for Harvey to die in ways that the raider can avoid with skilled play. As a raider, thinking your way past a clever trap and saving Harvey in the nick of the time, just so that you can get a hint as to where to go next, that's a great feeling, and it's one that a good maze builder wants to exploit. This brings us naturally to time waster number 3, which is killing Harvey. Now this is somewhat less important than the other 3 time wasters, but having Harvey killed in an unavoidable way is really annoying as a raider. And the solution here, of course, is obvious. Don't kill Harvey. Or if you do, at least provide a clear, obvious way for the raider to reliably save Harvey. And in order to reliably save them, you have to remember that load times are going to vary wildly between consoles and different PC hardware specs. So if you're going to kill Harvey, do it someplace in the maze itself, right? A Deadman Switch guard right at the entryway of a level is in no way, shape, or form stoppable by the raider on certain hardware specs. So you really got to be careful about how you do it in order to avoid frustrating the raider. Now you might ask, why do I want to leave Harvey alive, right? This is a maze. I want the raider to get lost. What's the point of leaving Harvey alive just to point out the route straight to the gen mat? Well, the point is that most raiders aren't actually going to follow Harvey, especially in a braided maze. Generally speaking, most raiders will try and solve a well-designed maze at least a few times before they just sit back and follow Harvey. Additionally, you can do various things to force Harvey to follow a specific pathway, and you can make him take the longest and most complicated pathway through the maze, right? Remember, you've got all these crossing, interconnected tunnels, and there can be bits and pieces here and there to kind of coax Harvey along one direction or another. The floor hollow cube, for instance, is an excellent tool to do this. So not only can you allow the raider to follow Harvey and use that to, push them through the hardest and most complicated path through the maze, you can also just take advantage of the fact that most raiders are going to not follow Harvey on their own as soon as they start encountering traps and guards in any density. Right? They're going to lose track of Harvey, they're going to get Harvey killed by setting off a trap themselves. So you want to allow for good counterplay to that by the raider. You want to allow the raider to save Harvey and gain clues from his presence. But at the same time, you also don't necessarily want to just make it easy on them. So yeah, take advantage of Harvey's pathway, and you'll end up being better off than if you had just killed Harvey in the first place. Let's go on to the 4th and final time waster, a lack of landmarks. If the raider is wandering in a featureless desert, they're going to get bored and annoyed every time they find out they've inevitably doubled back and gotten lost, especially since there's no way for them to reorient themselves. Remember, as a builder, you're going to spend quite a bit of time building this maze, so you know all the ins and outs and pathways. The raider, however, wants to get in and out, and generally speaking, they want to do so in about 15 minutes or less. So if they're in a featureless desert, they're just doomed to roam until they find something they can recognize, or at least a hallway with traps they haven't destroyed yet to give them some indicator as to where they've been. Now, the first and most obvious solution to this problem is just to decorate. And there's multiple ways you can do this, right? You can add decals and attachments, that's the obvious way. You could do something like adding exactly one plasma sentinel in the entire map, and you can stick it in a central location that the raider will crisscross and go back and forth past it, and they can use that every time to reorient themselves. You can have several different distinct zones in the map, each with a cohesive theme. You could even build some impressive piece of architecture that the raider will visit over and over again from various different angles. Every time they come back to that, they know where they are again. And speaking of architecture, glass blocks and non-opaque hardened skin corrosive cubes, or even traversable corrosive cubes, are your friend. They'll let the raider see the existence of other pathways, especially if there's lights or landmarks on the other side of the glass. And that gives the raider the ability to orient themselves if they've seen those landmarks before. And some other great ways to decorate involve changing up the tunnel geometry. Rather than just using a 1x1 hallway, expand to a 2x2 or a 3x3 grand hallway, build a giant area that's all on diagonals, or build a giant ramp, or even a big old spiral tower. Really anything to change up the meta of the tiny narrow 1x1 corridor. And as a side benefit, that gives you a lot more opportunity to add traps and guards in ways that the raider will not be expecting. Also, consider marking valid paths to the tombs and the gen mat. Now, please note, I didn't say valid Harvey paths. As long as the raider can get through a pathway and going that direction leads closer to the gen mat, I'd consider marking that passage with some sort of an icon indicating where the gen mat is. Fair game. You can put a nice Harvey decal there, you could put arrows there, some other sort of directional indicator to indicate to the raider where they're supposed to be going. You can even put some symbolism up front outside the maze to indicate to the raider that they can get, as an example, 2 tombs and 1 gen mat, and here's the icons that indicate those things. Most raiders either don't catch on to this immediately, or will catch on and start following the first decal they see, which is, of course, an excellent way to lure them into a hollow cube floor trap if the first decal that they see isn't the one that they should be following. So those are the 4 main issues with traditional mazes, and how I personally go about solving them. In the second part of this analysis, which I'll hopefully release shortly, I'm going to take you through the actual build process for a map based on these concepts. Anyway, that's all for today. Thanks for watching, I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next time.